Story 1. I'm a 23-year-old female, and I encountered a couple who seemed to be in their early 30s. This took place on a 5-hour flight. I always pay extra to choose my seat in advance. However, due to a medical emergency on an earlier flight that day, I was placed on standby because the displaced passengers were assigned to our flight, as it was the next one heading to the same destination. Fortunately, towards the end of boarding, my name was called. I got lucky and secured a seat on this flight, probably because they switched to a larger plane, instead of having to wait for the next flight. On this new flight, my seat ended up being the middle seat in a row of 3. When I arrived at my row, the man and woman were chatting and sharing a snack. It was obvious they were together. I mentioned to the man, who was in the aisle seat, that I was assigned the middle seat, and he got up to let me in. I asked them if they would prefer to sit together, saying I was totally okay with that and that they could choose the seats. The woman immediately reacted rudely, saying something like, "You're not supposed to be sitting here anyway." I explained the situation, even though I was pretty sure everyone on the plane was aware, as there had been announcements and rearranging. I offered to show her my new ticket, which indicated my seat number. She flicked her hand at my ticket and made a disgusted sound. I offered again to let them sit together, but she didn't respond. Her partner said, "It's okay," and seemed kinder between the two. I sat down, and he made some small talk about how full the plane was. The woman didn't wait long before interrupting us. She asked me, "Did you use one of those third-party websites to book your flight? It's so frustrating when people cheap out and inconvenience others." I told her I booked directly and explained that the only reason I was placed on standby, along with many others, was due to the medical emergency on another flight. None of us got to choose our seats. She then asked if I paid for seat selection, and I told her I did. Tired of her attitude, I put on my headphones and tried to do my own thing. For the remaining 4 hours, this woman kept reaching over me to tap her partner and tried to talk to him in a way that was super intrusive. Given that I was stuck between them, I could tell even her partner was trying to engage her less, hoping she would stop, but she didn't. Throughout, she acted as if I was the problem in this scenario. Despite this unforeseen situation, I think they tried to pull a tactic where they don't sit together on purpose, leaving the middle seat empty, hoping no one would sit between them. But on full flights, which most are, it doesn't work. And even so, it's not the other person's fault. Story 2. The entitled mother wants her just-turned 3-year-old to jump up to the 4-year-old classroom right away. She sets a meeting with the director to facilitate this. It turns out the previous teacher has told her that her child is a genius. Naturally, she believes this. The director has the 4-year-old teacher do assessments on the child, as well as the child's classmates, to determine if this is true. It is, of course, not true. The child is, in fact, average. The director has a second meeting with the entitled mother and the 4-year-old teacher to break the bad news. The entitled mother cries during the hour-and-a-half-long meeting, insisting that the average child is going to lose a year of their life if they do not skip a grade, like she did. She praises the 4-year-old teacher as the best teacher in the school and says she only wants the best for the average child, and that she wants to give the average child a head start. The director and the 4-year-old teacher mention that most parents hold their children back a year to give them a head start in kindergarten. The entitled mother says several times that the average child just misses the cutoff age to start kindergarten, enough that the director and the 4-year-old teacher have now memorized the exact hour of birth of the average child. The entitled mother reiterates that she does not want the average child to lose a whole year of their life. The director and the 4-year-old teacher are a bit miffed that the entitled mother does not consider the years lived in school to be either valuable or even years. The entitled mother insinuates that the previous teacher did not prepare the average child well, despite the previous teacher's high praise of the average child. The entitled mother coincidentally implies that she feels like last year, when the average child was in the 2-year-old room, was wasted and does not want to have the average child waste another year. That is, go into another 3-year-old room with the other 3-year-olds. She wants the average child to go into a 4-year-old room with their peers. Never mind that the 4-year-old teacher has told her that the average child is average and is in the correct room with their actual peers. The director finally concedes to transfer the average child to a younger 4-year-old room, which the 4-year-old teacher does not teach in, possibly in an effort to end the meeting. The entitled mother is not entirely happy, but asks that the average child be reassessed by the 4-year-old teacher after a month in the younger 4-year-old room. The director and the 4-year-old teacher agree. The entitled mother asks the 4-year-old teacher for things the nanny can do with the average child at home to help prepare them. The 4-year-old teacher wonders why the entitled mother cannot do this herself, as she is a stay-at-home mom, but agrees to give the entitled mother some activities to do with the average child. The 4-year-old teacher leaves their class to another teacher to craft and send a 3-page email an hour after the meeting, full of activities for a variety of developmental goals and domains, with differentiated levels and tips on when to move up to the next level. The entitled mother sends an email back minutes later, asking about possible products they can buy to give to the average child that may help them. The 4-year-old teacher is in class, but sends an email back at the end of the day, letting the entitled mother know that activities done with a parent are actually more effective, and links various articles and studies. The 4-year-old teacher blind carbon copies the director, who is in full agreement and backs the 4-year-old teacher. The average child moves to the younger 4-year-old classroom. The average child is still a very young 3-year-old and is in no way with their peers. The other 4-year-old teacher is not happy, as they trust the director and the 4-year-old teacher's assessment, but agrees to watch how the average child does in their class. The entitled mother asks the other 4-year-old teacher 2 days after the move how the average child is doing. The other 4-year-old teacher is confused that the entitled mother is expecting results so quickly. The other 4-year-old teacher says it takes time to learn. The entitled mother then sets up a meeting through the director for the other 4-year-old teacher to talk about the average child's progress. Having heard about the hour-and-a-half meeting earlier, the other 4-year-old teacher schedules the meeting for recess time in the classroom, so that there will be a natural conclusion to the meeting when the class comes back from recess, and sets the meeting for 2 weeks out. The entitled mother sends several emails daily to the other 4-year-old teacher during this interval, asking for updates, to which the other 4-year-old teacher replies as graciously as possible that the average child is still learning. In the meeting, the entitled mother asks again about the average child's progress and mentions that she has been working with the average child and has not seen any progress yet. The other 4-year-old teacher reiterates that it has only been 2 weeks, and it takes longer for children to commit things to long-term memory. The entitled mother asks again for the 4-year-old teacher to reassess the average child. The other 4-year-old teacher is miffed at the implication that they cannot correctly assess the average child and says that both teachers will assess the average child at the end of the month. At this point, the class comes back from recess. The entitled mother has to leave unsatisfied, while stories of her entitlement circulate through the school. Story 3. For context, I started working part-time at a charity kennel where we rehome dogs from the pound. Usually, there are just 2 of us working, me and the kennel manager K. The kennel itself consists of 3 small buildings where we keep the dogs, and there is a fence with a double gate at the front. One of the buildings extends just outside the fence with a small window that looks directly at one of the dogs. On this particular day, we had received a cabinet donation that someone had left out in their garden. Since we had some use for it, Kay asked me to wash and scrub it since it was filthy, while she walked the next dog on the list. So, I grabbed my earbuds and got to work disassembling and scrubbing it in the courtyard, catching up on the latest Reddit reading podcast. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw the entitled dad and kid. They had apparently just walked up and were looking into the open kennel window, squeaking a ball at the dog inside. I took out my earbuds, and this conversation ensued. Can I help you? Entitled dad, we're here to pick up our dog, Spot. Sorry, we don't have any dogs named Spot here. Entitled kid, but he's right there. We can see him through the window. He looks exactly like he did on the listing. Give us our dog now. Like I said, We don't have any dogs called Spot here. That's Jess. Are you sure you're at the right place? Entitled Dad. Yes, this is the address we were given. Op. Okay, who did you talk to? What's the name of the company or person? Entitled Dad, I don't know. Op. Okay, I don't think I will be able to help you. Why don't you wait for my manager to come back in around 15-20 minutes? She'll be able to sort you out. Entitled Dad. Okay, we'll wait. And they walked off. I put my earbuds back in and continued working. Not even 10 minutes later, the entitled kid came back with his phone in his hand. I took out my earbuds, and he told me his mom, the entitled mom, was on the other end and wanted to talk to me. Entitled Mom, why are you keeping our dog away from us? Let me talk to Vanessa. Op, hello to you too. I'm sorry, but we don't have any Vanessa working here, nor in the office associated with us. Entitled Mom, Vanessa told me to come here. This is the address we were given, so stop messing with us and just give us our dog. Op, I told you, no Vanessa works here. We don't have any viewings organized for today either. What's the name of the company you're looking for? Entitled Mom, we organized it with X Charity. Why are you making this so difficult? Op, ma'am, we're not affiliated with X Charity at all. You have the wrong place. Entitled Mom, stop lying. My kid saw the dog through your window. This is the address we were given, and we'll get our dog today. At this point, I saw my manager rounding the corner and just told the lady to talk to her, as she'd be able to help her more. I walked up to my manager, gave her a really quick summary and an apology for what was about to come, and handed over the phone. I didn't hear the conversation, but I was later told that she had a similar exchange in a very argumentative tone with a lady on the line. She doesn't take nonsense and told her to tone it down so they could figure this out. They eventually concluded that the family was looking for the kennels on the other side of the parking lot. The father and kid walked off, no apology or anything. A few minutes later, I saw my manager glued to the fence, and she called me to come watch with her. Looking to the other side of the parking lot, we saw the family walking out of the other kennel with their new dog, Spot. Spot was a smallish Shih Tzu. Jess is a massive Shiba Inu and Staffordshire Bull Terrier mix. Confused looks were shared between my manager and me. Story 4. So, I'm on this bus, right? Minding my own business, just scrolling through my phone, headphones in, vibing to whatever playlist Spotify thinks suits my mood today. I'm on my way to the train station to visit my mom, and the day's pretty chill so far. Enter Karen. And no, not the "can I speak to the manager" Karen, but the "I just got divorced, and the world owes me something" Karen. She storms onto the bus, yapping away on her phone, looking like a thunderstorm in human form. I catch bits and pieces of her conversation, something about alimony, cheating, the whole drama package. So, Karen hangs up, glares around the bus, and spots an old dude, maybe pushing 70, chilling in the elderly seat. Now, the bus ain't crowded, so there's plenty of other seats available. But Karen, she's got her sights set on that one. She marches up to the old man, and I can already sense trouble brewing. She demands his seat like she's some kind of queen needing a throne. The old guy, being the gentleman he is, tries to explain that, "Sorry lady, you're not entitled to the elderly seat just because your love life's in shambles." Now, instead of just finding another seat, Karen goes ballistic. She starts shouting at this poor old man, telling him he's the reason she's stressed and on the verge of a breakdown. The old guy, God bless him, calmly tells her she's not entitled to anything, let alone his seat. And here's where it gets good. The old guy, with a sly grin, goes, "No wonder you got divorced with that attitude." Now, I didn't see it coming, but Karen turned into a live wire at that moment. She goes from angry to furious in a split second, winds up her arm, and bam! She straight up punches the old fella in the face. Blood starts gushing from his nose, and the whole bus goes dead silent, like a record scratch in a movie. Now, I'm not the type to let things slide. I take my headphones off, stand up, and look Karen dead in the eye. "You really just punched a grandpa over a bus seat?" I say, not caring that I'm about to unleash a storm of consequences. Mind your own business, sweetheart, Karen spits back. Well, I ain't having that. I whip out my phone, dial 911, and announce to the bus. This entitled lady just punched an old man in the face. We're gonna need the cops here. Karen's eyes widen. She probably thought she could throw a punch and waltz away like nothing happened. But not today. So, we wait, me, the old guy, and the rest of the bus, all glaring at Karen like she's some kind of alien who just landed and ruined our day. The cops show up surprisingly fast, and I give them the lowdown how Karen here thinks she's above the law because her marriage went down the drain. They cuff her, and as they lead her away, she's still screaming about how life's unfair and we're all against her. The bus erupts in applause, and I shoot a little smirk at Karen, like, you reap what you sow, lady. The old guy, who's now got tissue stuck up his nose, pats me on the shoulder. Thanks for stepping in, young lady. Never thought I'd get decked over a bus seat. No problem, Pops, I say, offering him a smile. People like her need a reality check. The bus ride continues, a bit shaken, but mostly back to normal. I find my seat, plug my headphones back in, and try to get back to my Spotify groove. But man, it's hard to shake off the adrenaline from witnessing a Karen meltdown live. As I finally reach the train station, I give the old guy a nod. Take care, Grandpa. Hope the rest of your day is Karen-free. He chuckles. You too, kid. Stay out of trouble. I head off, thinking about how some people need a serious reality check. Maybe Karen will learn a lesson from this, or maybe she'll keep storming through life, leaving chaos in her wake. Either way, it's just another day in the city, where bus rides turn into unexpected dramas, and you never know when you'll have to stand up literally against entitled Karens. Story 5. Some background first. I worked for a precast concrete company as a job in between high school and college. The job sucked, but it paid well. We made a lot of the massive storm culverts and tunnel pieces that are dropped in place during construction instead of being made where they are. After a few weeks of working for this company, I was trained to run the industrial concrete mixer and did this every day. This mixer was 3 stories tall, mixed up to 4.5 cubic yards of concrete at a time, and was the most beat-up machine in the entire plant, which was saying something. It ran 6 days a week, 2 shifts a day, and was never maintained because the company couldn't get techs to come out on Sunday, its only day not running, and didn't want to lose a work shift to get it maintained. The only good thing about it was that all the materials were weighed and fed in automatically. All it took was a button to start the process. The most common problem was the bottom release door not sealing correctly. It would be just barely cracked, allowing all the water to run out of it, resulting in an unusable chunky mess that would need to be dumped in a scrap hole instead of being used. If this happened, the mess needed to be dumped out of the mixer quickly before it could partially harden inside the mixer. This only happened once that I was there, and it took an entire shift to chisel the stuff out. We put a mark into the sliding door to show where it should be versus where it would be when it didn't seal. The process worked like this. A cage of rebar and anchor points was constructed on a base around a core, and a form bolted around it. The guy signed off, and the form was then filled with concrete and left to cure. The curing time largely depends on the ambient temperature. The hotter it is, the faster it cures, and vice versa. Once the piece has cured enough to be lifted, the form is stripped and the piece lifted by crane off the core. Repeat until you have as many pieces ordered. Another thing to note is hard hat colors. They were color-coded according to your role. Blue are plant supervisors, green red the foreman, etc. For the normal workers, there was a choice of 2 colors. Yellow for people who don't know what they are doing, typically new or dumb people, and gray for those that do. This was about 5 months into my time with them, and I had just got a gray one maybe 2 months before. On to the story. Our plant was starting to produce pieces at a substantially slower rate than the other plant owned by the company. We were working 10-12-hour days every day to try and make up the difference. Typically multiple pieces were made per form, per day 2-4. We were only managing 1 and maybe 2 per form per day. To figure out the reason for this, the owner's plan was to send an exec from the main office to observe and time every section of the process in our plant. This in itself was silly. Remember how I said the speed concrete cures is based on temperature? Our plant was in an unheated warehouse in a state bordering Canada. The other plant was in Florida. Can you guess why production was a bit slower in our plant? In any case, during the shift meeting before the exec got there, our foreman's exact words were, "Do what he tells you, otherwise stay away from him." Wonderful. The shift proceeds as normal, building cages and forms get bolted. Maybe 6 hours into the shift, I climb up on top of the mixer to the platform, and I am greeted by the exec in the shiniest white hard hat I have ever seen, and office attire complete with black dress shoes. In a concrete plant, he looked bored out of his mind. He asked me something to the effect of if I was looking forward to the end of the shift in 2 hours. I told him that with no problems we might get to leave in 4 hours. He got the most defeated look on his face and mumbled something that I didn't catch. I went through the pre-checks on the mixer and found the bottom door was once again not closing properly. I yelled down to the plant supervisor that the door wasn't sealing again, and that the machine would be down until I got it to seal, normally by chipping the concrete left by the previous shift after using the mixer away from the opening. The plant supervisor yelled back a few choice words directed at the mixer and stormed into his office. The exec had a look and said he thought the door looked fine. I told him that it did this a lot and that it wasn't sealed, pointed out the mark to him, and went to get the tool. I bribed a fabricator with energy drinks to make me chip away the concrete. A braking bar welded onto a rebar shaft that I kept under the mixer itself. No more hunting down an air gun and going through confined space lock and tag outs. Just stand on top and poke at the concrete until the door moves freely. Upon coming back with the tool, the exec told me that the seal was fine and to run it. I pointed out the same things about the door or sealing regularly. I asked if they were sure. They replied in the affirmative. I started up the mixer. The mixer regularly threw a bunch of silica up into the air. With the water draining out the bottom, this was going to get extra dusty. I offered them an extra mask that I had, and they replied that they would be fine. Well, it's not my lungs. At the same time, I noticed the plant's heavy equipment guy walking into the building and got his attention and made the hand gesture for the front loader. I got a what the hell look from them, and they mouthed why. I pointed down at the mixer, repeated the gesture, and they threw up their hands and turned around. The load went into the mixer, water started draining out the bottom, dust went everywhere. Go figure. The plant supervisor comes out of the office, I assume after seeing the giant cloud on the cameras, runs over, and says something like, "What are you doing?" The mixer is quite loud with concrete in it. I got the general gist though. I just pointed to the exec, who was now covered in dust and staring at the water, pouring out the bottom of the mixer. Never said a word. The plant supervisor's head swiveled, and he just crooked a finger at the exec. The exec climbed down. They exited the building with the plant supervisor leading. The fallout. The front loader was able to get to the mixer before the mess was able to partially cure inside it, so the cleanup was as easy as dumping it into the bucket, and then dumping that in the scrap hole and spraying out the mixer. We continued the shift after I chipped the concrete away from the door and got it closing properly again. Not too much time wasted, maybe an hour. The foreman asked what happened later in the shift and didn't stop laughing for the rest of it. The plant supervisor talked to me afterwards, asked what happened, and told me he didn't blame me for that dumb jerk's mistakes, since he had said to do what the exec said. I never saw the exec again, and the plant supervisor never said what happened in the parking lot. I can only assume that the most this produced was angry phone calls and a lot of concrete wasted. Story 6. Hi again. So, I just wanted to update you all on what happened. As part of her tantrum, she called me a liar for mentioning certain things. I told her that I could swear on the Quran we're Muslims, and if I'm lying, may I perish. She really said, "You're not afraid of death, so you might as well go ahead." That statement stuck with me, and is what I'd use once I cut her off. We did go and see the lawyer after she sent me money. In the eyes of the lawyer and in his presence, she acted all pleasant, as if we were on good terms, and chimed in when I was only speaking to the lawyer. We got a letter to send to my aunt in another city to confirm my dad is dead. After my aunt signs it, and we also sign, we will have a day in court where the probate is filed, and then everything will finally be in my name. The moment we left the place, she ignored my existence. She more or less snatched her bag from the floor when we left, so I couldn't even pretend to take it from her to prevent her from acting out. She walked ahead of me while I walked behind her, listening to music, as we both headed to a place where we could get a bus home. She entered a restaurant to buy food, and I followed her because she has this tendency to change the narrative and claim I didn't want to talk to her and ignored her if I had decided to actually leave and go my way. She bought food and ignored me, despite the fact that during our fight, I told her I hadn't eaten properly in about 3 days. I saw a friend in the restaurant and waited until she was near the door to say hi, as I knew she would try to embarrass me if she knew I knew anyone there. True to my thoughts, as soon as I said hi and told the person I was leaving, she turned around and more or less yelled at me, asking why I was following her around. The restaurant was almost full, and there were a lot of people there. As I didn't want any further embarrassment, I waved my friend goodbye and walked out of the restaurant while telling her that, because I want to. She kept on repeating it on the road, and I told her that the bus going towards my route would be the same one I'd meet while following this route. She proceeded to ask why I was following her, and said I didn't respect her because I didn't take her bag from her and made her hold all the bags she was carrying. I reminded her of the fact that she more or less snatched the bag from the floor at the lawyer's office. So there was no way I was taking it from her, as it seemed as if she didn't want me to take it from her. Then she decided to keep reiterating why I was following her, and I told her that it's because I don't want her to change the narrative. I told her I know she's going to tell people that I offended her and refused to talk to her, and that I'm the one sulking. I just want her to know I'm not angry. I couldn't care less about the situation. I'm perfectly fine and don't mind speaking to her. But she's the one who doesn't want to speak to me. She can be mad all she wants, as that's on her. But I don't want her to go around telling people that I'm mad at her when I don't care. I kept on saying that I was perfectly fine and wasn't emotional about the situation. That's why I'm following her, so she knows that I don't care about it anymore, and that she's the one who wasn't speaking to me, and not the other way around. She kept quiet and didn't utter a single word after that. She'd be sending the letter to my aunt somewhere this week, so hopefully I can update you all if anything comes up, and if we were able to finish the process. I don't think she knows that she has effectively pushed her only daughter away. I told my boyfriend about what happened, and he said it could only mean one thing. She was jealous of me, and has been jealous since I was a kid when she used to berate my dad. He's not the only one who's told me that, and it just makes me sad. She doesn't know I have a boyfriend, as she's been trying to hint that she wants me to get married next year, and she's seriously determined, but I'm in no way, shape, or form ready for marriage. She claims that she wants me to give birth and give my children to her to raise, and unless hell freezes over, that's not happening. Story 7. To preface this, I am not 100% innocent in this. I made mistakes I could never take back, but in the end, I'm glad it happened, as it taught me a valuable lesson. Due to my autism, I was never really that good at making friends. I wouldn't understand until after this nightmare how normal it is for people like me to be that way. Anyway, I go by female pronouns now, but when this occurred, I not only hadn't come out as transgender, but still believed I was truly straight. In the summer of 2020, near the time the pandemic had picked up here in the Midwest, I had gotten a job as a package handler for a well-known parcel service. We'll call it Shypex for the story. While the job wasn't perfect, I found myself enjoying the work of loading box vans for delivery. It didn't take up most of my day, so I could spend my time off relaxing the way I wanted to, such as playing video games or watching Kitchen Nightmares. Around this time, my dad had gotten his second divorce. If this wasn't important, I wouldn't have brought it up. But at the time, I was living with him. My sister moved out, thinking my dad was moving a bit too fast with his new girlfriend, who he is still with today, and I'm glad he's happy. To tell the honest truth, I also thought he was moving a bit fast, and being 20 years old and in no condition to live on my own, I didn't have many options. Then, peak season had approached, and Shypex hired a bunch of new people. This included a young man who I'll call Parasite for reasons you'll soon learn. He was a bit older than me, 27 I believe at the time, but he lived close by my house and had similar interests. We both liked anime and video games, and at first, I had thought I had finally made a friend. Just like the year, hindsight was 2020. After I started hanging out with Parasite, I grew resentful of my dad. I look back how much of an ass I was, and I still feel bad, even now. But at the time, I believe I had reached a sort of belated teenage rebellion, and honestly didn't give a shit. At the same time as when I met Parasite, my dad was preparing to move in with his girlfriend, 2 hours north in Minnesota. I was a little bummed, but then Parasite's opportunity to infect me had came. After I was already vulnerable, my dad sold our spare vehicle, as he didn't think we needed it. And then, on Christmas Day, my beloved car, a 2006 Scion TC, blew up, and it never ran again. I was in ruins. How would I get anywhere, even to work? How could I find a job without a car? And that's when I sort of snapped. I'm not proud of this, but I told my dad that very day I was not moving to Minnesota, and instead wanted to take over his current lease and have Parasite move in. Obviously, he wasn't very happy, but being my dad, he didn't stop me. I booked into a hotel for a week, bought my grandpa's 20 Tahoe so I had something to drive, and eventually, everything was situated. Parasite took my brother's old room, and we started being roommates. Now, at this point in the story, my dad had believed I had came out of the closet, and was too embarrassed to tell him, but in truth, it was I who didn't know I wasn't straight at the time. At first, everything started out well, and then Parasite made his first move. The Tahoe, while good for the harsh Iowa winter, was eating up gas like crazy, and I knew I needed something else. And then, in February, we found a 20 Chevy Monte Carlo. Now, as I wasn't the greatest at car shopping, I invited my grandpa to look at it with me as well, since it wasn't far from his house. Dad said not to buy it. Grandpa said not to buy it. Parasite said to buy it. Can you guess what I did? Reddit. That's right, I bought the car, as Parasite used my lack of knowledge on cars to convince me it had a custom engine. He obviously wanted it since it was a very customizable car, and had all these ideas for it. Oh yeah, and he didn't have a license. But I did. At this time, as well, Parasite had left Shypex for another job, and this one was paying the bills. Then, after the neighbors had slashed my tires, we decided the 4-bedroom house was not good anymore. It was much bigger than we needed, but it did until that point. We eventually found a small 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom in my grandparents' neighborhood, only a small jaunt down the street from their place. Not only did I like that, as I loved hanging out at their place, but now I was completely free from my dad's control. Parasite had done it again. Now, something I learned quickly about Parasite is that he will lie about his past, using things he learns about his host to his advantage. Both of my parents were in the army, and because of that, I was born in Germany as a US citizen. It's a fact about myself I absolutely love, as it's so fun to tell people. Well, apparently, Parasite was also in the army. In fact, he was in the Special Forces, and loved to tell the story of how he was on medical duty, and brained an enemy soldier to death with a microscope and stabbed another with his scalpel. My naive brain thought this was cool, but I did question how a high school dropout was certified to be an army medic. He also claimed to have been abandoned in Moscow and had to lift cars to get the cash needed to return to the US, and how his father was Japanese, which I never believed. I'll be honest, it really surprised me how much I bought into his bullshit. Anyway, things started to go downhill around summer of 2021. I had just turned 21 and had reconciled with my wicked witch of a mother, as Parasite had made me resent my dad so much. I preferred her company to his. And then, it happened. I woke up. Parasite began working at Shypex again, after having 4 different jobs. I, however, never left Shipex, and even was able to hold on to that job when I moved away. I wanted to play my own games, watch my own shows, and, of course, visit my family. But he didn't like that. I was paying all of the bills, and never had any money to buy what I wanted. When I was broke, he actually argued on how selfish I was for buying that game instead of paying for our food we ate out like 3 times a week, and how I could be the reason we get evicted. We were walking almost everywhere because the shitty Carlo was in the shop more than my driveway, and eventually it all came to a head. In an online game called Warframe, no less. Around this time, I started to feel trapped, and eventually moved back to my hometown in Arizona with my mom, and I sold that piece of shit Chevy for $100. I would later find out that Parasite's time in Moscow and the Special Forces was actually a halfway house in Iowa City, after he was supposedly convicted of sexual assault. While he was later proven innocent, it actually rattled me that he would lie to me like that. While in Arizona, he threatened me, and I blocked his number. I later came out as gay to my mom, and the turmoil there led me to reconciling with my dad, who I now live with in Minnesota. While he isn't supportive of me being transgender, but I can live with that over being with Parasite.